Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsyreplays. Welcome back to the channel. Now, this morning we had what I believe is the worst medium tank in tier 10, and we're going to keep that trend going. You've got 3 videos today. Yes, 3 videos, a 3 video special. So we've had the medium tanks, the worst medium tank in tier 10. So now we're going to look at the worst tank destroyer in tier 10, and then later tonight we will have the worst heavy in tier 10. We're not going to do light tanks because there is only a few light tanks. So worst tank destroyer in tier 10. Now there are quite a few tank destroyers, not as many as heavies, not as many as medium tanks, but there are quite a few tank destroyers in tier 10. Now we're going to go through the list. Now the Foch 155, not played as much now than it once was, but it is still a fantastic tank, especially when Wargaming gave it the new gun, which is an auto loader gun, which is incredible. This tank still doesn't get enough credit. It is a fantastic tank and up there with one of the better tier 10 tank destroyers. Now the WZ113, now this will be many people's choice of the worst tank destroyers. However, I think this tank is fantastic. It's got a good armor profile, it's got a good gun, and not only that, but it's if you have the attachment, it also has a bike. Yeah, it also has a bike at the rear of it that you can put on. There we go, there's the bike. That makes all the difference. That really makes all the difference, because if you get into a sticky situation and you can't get out and you get isolated, you can just get on the bike and run away. It's simple as that. But jokes aside, I love this tank. I really think this is a fantastic tank. The Hori next. Again, I don't even need to talk about this tank. Absolutely brilliant. One of the best tier 10 tank destroyers in the game. So we don't even need to talk about the Hori. The Death Star. Now, again, this could be people's choice. This could be people's choice, but I'm not going to put this as the worst tank destroyer in tier 10 because I don't think it is. You know, it can change outcomes of the game. This can change a game, but I still don't think it's a fantastic tank. It can be fun, but it's also the most frustrating tank probably in the game, if I'm honest. But I'm not going to put this as bottom tier because it has the highest alpha in the game, and especially with the Hesh, you could do up to 1625 damage per shot. So yeah, I'm not going to stick this at the bottom. Close to being at the bottom though, probably second from bottom, I would put the Badger. Because yeah, I mean, this only has sort of one playstyle really, and that is front line on a ridge. Other than that, if you get tanks behind you, the side of you, you're just going to get absolutely torn apart. But other than that, I think it can be decent. You can have good games. If you can get yourself in a hold down position, then you will get bounces in this tank. FV4005, the ship bomb. Good tank, very good tank with the speed boost and the interclip reload, this shell reload boost. It makes this tank really, really, really good. Very difficult to play, but with the free shell autoloader as well, you can deal a big amount of damage in a short time. Object 268. Now this tank is very similar of the WZ113 GFT. Now people will say that the WZ is a fake 268. This tank is very good. However, people haven't been playing this tank as it once was. It was probably one of the most played tank destroyers in tier 10. Nowadays, you very, very rarely see it, but it's still a very, very good tank. Object 263, again, the YOLO wagon. In the right hands, this is still a fantastic tank. The only downfall with this tank is the gun depression. You really do suffer with the gun depression, but it's got a great rate of fire. The best in tier 10, I believe, at just over nearly, what is it? Let's have a look. Almost 4,000. Yeah, 3,800. So it is one of the best in tier 10. But in the right hands, in the right situation, in the right map, this tank is fantastic. Grill, again, I don't really need to talk about the grill. One of the most played tier 10 tank destroyers. Fantastic. The speed, the gun, of course, the armor of the gun, because people will shoot the gun, and you will get quite a few bounces just from that gun. Look how big the gun is. Absolutely incredible, but a fun tank to play as well. The Jaegeru, I mean, the gun on this is brilliant. The armor profile, not so good. It is basically an E100 shell. it's got too many weak points for me. And it's a very slow tank, but it is still a very good tank, and it's got a nice gun. So moving on, E3. Now the E3 again is one of my favourite tier 10 tank destroyers. Since Wargaming buffed this tank, gave it more speed, it's actually a fantastic tank. Now at one point years ago, this was probably the worst tank in the game. This was, I mean, it was very slow. You couldn't do nothing at all with this tank, but Wargaming buffed the speed and it really changed this tank. Now the best thing about this is the armor profile as well. That hatch on top, yeah, you can't really penetrate it. Very, very difficult to penetrate that hatch. The bottom plate is basically the only place you can penetrate. You do have these little the weak points in this little hatch here. That is actually a weak point that can be HE'd, but I mean, look how small it is. It's not a lot of people can get that shot off. So moving on from the E3 is what I think is currently the worst tier 10 tank destroyer. I mean, it's a good tank. It is a good tank. Leading on from the T30, I think the T30 is much better than this. And the downfall with this, yes, it doesn't have a turret, which is, I mean, it does have a turret, which is good, but it just doesn't have the armor profile that the E3 has got. I would like to see the hatch on this buffed. Now, the hull on this isn't as strong as the E3 as well. Now, I get Wargaming don't want to make tanks that are very similar, and if you do buff this tank, then yeah, it's going to be similar to the E3, but it's not in a way because it has a turret. It's a completely different playstyle than the E3, because you have that turret. So I think maybe even if Wargaming was to make the hull weaker, but to buff that hatch, I would think that would be fantastic. But currently, I do believe that the E4 is currently the worst tank destroyer in tier 10. Now, as I said with the mediums, just because I am saying that these tanks are the worst in the game, not in the game, in tier 10, it doesn't mean that they are bad tanks. Like the 30B this morning, I like the 30B. I think you can have decent games in it. I don't think it's a bad tank at all, but if you compare that tank to other medium tanks, I do honestly think it is the worst medium tank. And that is why exactly the same for this E4. Doesn't mean you can't have good games. I mean, one of my highest ever damage games was in the E4 at 7.8k damage. And you can perform in this tank. But it doesn't, for me, it doesn't compare with the E3. It doesn't compare with the E3 at all. Yes, it has a turret, but the armor profile, I mean, that hatch on top just stops you doing so many things that you want to do. You want to use the gun depression, you want to use the turret armor that this tank has got, but you can't because people will just go for that hatch. Of course, you can get bounces in this tank. You can see the gun mantlet, someone has penetrated me there. But yeah, you just can't perform as well in this tank than you can in the E3. But again, it doesn't mean that you can't perform, and people will like this tank. I understand people like these tanks, and I sort of like the tank. I do kind of like the tank, but I just think it is not as strong as the other tank destroyers in the game. And that's what I mean. Like, I like these videos, but I don't like these videos because just because I'm saying that this is the worst tank destroyer, people will be like, how are you saying this is a bad tank? I love this tank. Yeah, you might like this tank, but compare this to all the other tank destroyers in the game, in tier 10, then this is at the bottom. And the only tanks that really come close to this tank is the E3 and not the E3, the Badger and the T60, the Object 263. Other than that, all the other tank destroyers are really, really good. The Object 263 is really, really good, but it's only good in the right situation, and that is the same as the Badger. Now, this, you don't play it like a tank destroyer. It is basically a heavy tank. So if you play it like a tank destroyer, you're not going to do too well. Play it as a heavy, and that's why I'd like the hatch to be buffed on this tank, because you do play it like a heavy, but you can't really play it like a heavy because you just get deleted. People just aim for your hatch, and if you are front line, you haven't got that armor profile, not like the E3 has. The E3 has fantastic armor, and you can be front line. E3 on mines, wow, like no one is penning you. Like no one at all is going to penetrate you on if you're on mines. But as if you get into the same, let me just fast forward this quickly, nothing exciting happens just yet, but if you get into the same kind of situation or same kind of position in the E4, then you are just going to get wrecked. You can't go hold down on mines like you can the E3. But I do understand, like, you don't want the same play style for every tank. I get that. But just look at tanks like the T62 and the Object 140. They are both the same tank, kind of, but with little differences. And that is what I'd like between this and the E3. The E3 frontally is just mega strong. Side and rear, of course, they're not as strong. But I'd just like a bit more of, bit more turret armor, bit more on that hatch, and I think that would be fantastic. So this game now, it was a 2 versus 6. It's a 2 versus 6. Me and Kakalo here, in the Object 907 from the Amor clan. So I mean, at this point, we've done 2.5k damage almost. We've done our job. I know the right side didn't hold that, which is understandable. But I pushed the left side because my heavies were pushing here. I wanted to go to the middle, and I thought we could take these guys out nice and easy. Temperature too hot yet again. So it's now a 2 versus 4. The enemy are capping bases. And I mean, with the E3, I mean, that shot there from the Badger wouldn't have penned, and I can guarantee that wouldn't have penned, but they are penning me very easily. Now, yes, we have bounced 600 hit points, but in it, I think in an E3 we would have bounced so much more. We would have had more hit points than we currently have, and I just think the situation we would have been in if I was an E3 would have been much easier. So still a 2 versus 4 at the moment. I get the shot onto the object, and again, easy pen for that object. Now, unfortunately for him, he is actually going to get a bounce there. So luckily we do get that bounce, and I have all the noobs, all-time noobs. Okay, God knows what that shot was there. That again was my fault. And you can say in the E3 I wouldn't have been able to turn around like that. No, I wouldn't have been, and that is why I do like the E4. And the E4 in them kind of situations is sort of better than the E3. But literally the only thing I would like to see change with the E4 is that hatch. You don't have to give it the same hatch as the E3. I mean, just make it stronger. I'm not asking for it to be literally impenetrable so people can't penetrate it, but I'd like for it to be a lot more difficult for people to be able to penetrate it, because currently if you go hold down, a medium tank using AP can go through it like butter, and that's where I would like it to change. I mean, the E4's got a turret, it's got gun depression, but you can't use that gun depression because of the hatch. Now, we still got 1200 block damage. Of course, you can still get block damage. You can get block damage in any tank. But I think, for me, looking at the E4 compared to all the other tank destroyers in the game, I will go and say it is the worst tank destroyer in the game. Now, we're just going to finish this game up. Very nice carry. I mean, a 2 versus 6, absolutely fantastic. I still got 3.6k damage. This guy was an absolute legend. He gets himself an ace as well. 5.5k damage. I think he got, 5.5k damage and a well-deserved ace. So yeah, that is my opinion. What is your guys' opinion? What do you think is the worst tier 10 tank destroyer in the game? I'd like to know in the comments below. I'll be back later, as said, with the worst heavy tank in tier 10. So for now, I'll catch you all later. Bye bye.